subscriber is still picking up something. I'm going to do you, it says.
I'm not.
And now it says it again.
I did your trick. I completely renamed it. That seemed to work.
It is a minute after.
Okay, if everyone can get set, we're good. Everyone gets sat down and we will get started. You are in the ADD session, Adaptive DNS Discovery session at IETF 120. If you think you're in a different session, you're in the wrong room. This is an IETF meeting, and it is, of course, subject to the note well. You should familiarize yourself with the contents of the note well. It covers IPR, it covers behavior, it covers patents, copyright, many, many good topics. You should be familiar with it by now, this part of the week. Especially, look, we are working together as colleagues, and we have a set of expectations amongst each other on how we shall treat each other with respect and kindness. And I will emphasize that one of the rules we've had in this particular working group since the very beginning of ADD is we will always treat each other with kindness. And it's worked really well. Meeting tips. If you're in the Meet Echo tool, there's ways here you can go for the on-site tool. If you have not registered as being a participant in this room, there's a QR code right over here. Please scan it with your phone, go log in, and your attendance will be counted. We use this for a lot of reasons. In particular, we use it for figuring out next time how big a room we need to have the ADD session. And for people attending, here's some resources. I'm Glenn Dean. I'm from Comcast NBC Universal. I'm one of the coaches of ADD.
Hi, I'm the other guy.
My co-chair, Elon Musk, would like to give all of you a lot of money. And of course,
nobody deserves that.
Not only do we have an AD, we have the best AD, Eric Nick.
What are you trying to get out of him?
I don't know. I start wondering, right? So.
It's not what I want out of him right now. It's what I want out of him next time down the road. Okay. This is our agenda for today. It's been published for a while now up in Data Tracker, but we are going to have some comments. Then we will follow with presentations from Tommy Jensen, who has 2 presentations he will be giving today. And then finally, Dan Wing will be giving us a presentation on a draft that is out there and some other materials and looking at some architectural questions this group is sort of working through as part of our next phase of work in ADD. So in terms of document status, I would like to make the following comment. We got another one out.
You jumped too far ahead.
Oh, scribes.
We still don't have a scribe.
I was doing so well there.
And yeah, I know. And while Tim is online and has graciously volunteered to do it in the past, it would be super great if we didn't have to compel him into that service again. So is anybody else willing to please scribe for us?
And I've already put in the draft agenda into the note document. So you don't even have to do that part. You just have to fill in any action items that we decide on, because the actual other notes and the transcription has already been taken. So you don't have to do a narrative. You just have to put down the highlights.
The skeleton is filled. And Tim is also begging somebody else to please do it.
And well, I was going to say Tommy can't do it because Tommy will be presenting, so he's got an out. Yeah. So in the future, if you don't want to be the scribe at AD, Ben's volunteering. Thank you, Ben.
Fantastic, Ben. Thank you so much. And Tim will assist you in backing up. So
at least we didn't have to do like the mock guys did, which is give out chocolate. Yeah. I mean, we haven't had to do
that would be terrible. Ben, I'll get you some chocolate after this.
Okay. moving on with the agenda. This is the agenda. Is there any additions or removals people would like to request of these items? Okay, that's the agenda bash. Mr. ADD, would you like to make any comments? Okay. I would like to make an announcement and recognize that we got another RFC published. This is the 4th RFC this group has published. Well done. It's RFC 9606 DNS resolver information. So thank you for all of your very hard work on this, and to the editors who worked on that document and the original authors who submitted the material. Thank you. We have a draft right now that's in with the ISG for final review and publication. They're chugging along on that, and I'm sure it will be our 5th RFC. So well done to everybody. So moving on, Tommy, you're the next on the agenda. Come on up here and you can play The Price is Right. Which deck do you want shown first, Tommy?
Sorry?
Which of your
deck?
2 decks?
Oh, let's do EDSR first.
Okay. And just let me know when you want me to flip the slides.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. Since last time, next slide, please. We got EDSR adopted. So now as a working group document, here is what has changed to get it to that 0.0. All the DDR references have been made specific to the discovery mode that's being discussed in context. We reuse DDR rather than redefining things ourselves via references. TTL stretching has been banished. Sorry about that. Clarified that delegated credentials are negotiated as they are defined in their own RFC 9345, I believe, rather than the accidental implication that everyone had to support it all the time that we had encoded in the previous draft. EDSR capable servers have to handle blank SNIs because that's a fact of life when you are discovered via DDR section 5. And failed redirections always go back to the original server. No caching along the chain to decide, oh, I'll only go back this far. No, redirections go until they don't, and you go back to the original, made clear throughout the document, and that was a little ambiguous earlier. And then various editorial changes. Thank you to everyone for helping us suss out all of these needed changes. Next slide, please. So now what? We're in the official working group GitHub repo. There are a couple of issues there that were migrated from the old or that were brought up more recently editorially. Thank you to our responsible AD. But it's looking kind of sparse. And after taking 4 IETFs to get adopted, I'm doubting anyone who wants to hear me say, are we ready for working group last call? So all that feedback you were holding on to because it didn't block adoption, now's the time. At the next IETF, the ask to the room is, does anyone want a hackathon with us? John Todd, one of the co-authors, has graciously offered to have something for us to test against. And so being able to see some working bits would be really fun. So yeah, that's the end of this slide deck, I believe. There are no other slides. And so if there's any feedback you have on the draft or any questions, now's the time.
One from the chair. So I want to point out we have Do Not Resuscitate.
Yes.
We have Dance Dance Revolution. So what does EDSR mean?
For the record, as a co-author of DNR, I'd like to remind the chairs that I suggested DNDR, but was told that 4 letters were too many because things like HTTP, DHCP, these other things, they're too long. So DNR is kind of your fault.
Wow.
So apparently EDSR means Enhanced Deep Residual Networks.
Oh.
So
at least it's networking related.
it's also, maybe Eric can comment on this, a acronym for the French Road Safety Department.
Kind of stretch and think of that as networking as well.
I was thinking Guitar Hero would be a good name for this draft, but that's just me.
Yeah. Something note well and IPR. I don't know if we have any attendees in the room though.
Okay. So that's the end. Is any questions online or in the room on this draft? Well, apparently they're saving all their energy for doing it through the GitHub.
Oh, there we
have
go.
Ben.
Ben, don't let me down.
Ben Schwartz, Meta, but formerly Google. So I implemented this behavior in Chrome about 2 or 3 years ago. So you should check if, it would be great to have a hackathon and you can see if Chrome already does it.
When you say 2 or 3 years, I think this draft was created 1.5 years ago.
Yeah. I agreed with the premise and I, so much that I actually already did it.
I love that kind of support.
So I want to call that out. We have a deployed implementation before the
Before.
draft was created. I love that.
Best working group? Best
So-
working group.
It is not, the behavior is not identical. And so it would be interesting to know how far off it is, what kinds of compatibility sharp edges you might
You
find
did not
using.
3 years ago take into account the things on slide 2. That is unfortunate. Yeah, no, that would be good. I appreciate you bringing that up. I had either missed that or forgotten or had no idea. That's really cool. Which also means that's an edge, right? Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do the other deck, which I thought would be the shorter one, but might end up being the longer one, depending on how people feel about new drafts. Okay, so the other deck is about work that is being presented in the DNS Ops session later today. If you don't have a conflict, you should go. And if you do, you should skip it and go anyway, because I'll be talking about 2 different things there that you probably care about. This is the first, client authentication recommendations for encrypted DNS, co-authored between the folks here, myself, Jess, Jeff, and Matt. Next slide, please. To basically talk about usually clients authenticating to an encrypted DNS server is a bad thing in the consumer case because it's exactly de-anonymization, it's user tracking, right? We don't want to do that. But in managed cases, and I use the word enterprise because it helps us map to real human thinking, but practically whenever the administrator of both ends is the same entity and wants to do this or gate access to the name resolutions and control who gets to see those name resolutions, then authentication suddenly does make sense. And so this draft is attempting to lay out when it makes sense, since a client being overly willing to provide authentication to a server is a bad thing, but still needing to sometimes means guidance is good. And then talking through what the recommended practice should be. Next slide, please. And just as a spoiler alert, this is the approach we took where we talked about, well, in this scenario, these are the kind of requirements we'd want to evaluate different auth mechanisms against. We wanted something that can amortize its cost so that it's per connection, not per query. Do the thing we always do here in the IETF and reuse open standards, avoid vendor lock-in, and not have to be reinvented between DO, between DOT, between DOC, between whatever we do next. And not require my grandmother to click a button in order to proceed, right? And so if this is interesting to you, you should come join session 5. But that's all the slides here because we're not going to actually talk about it. So FYI. Next slide, please. The other topic is very poorly named, as has been pointed out to me, and I'm in full agreement, is essentially an update to RFC 7050. Which defines, among other things, how to securely, but by definition, how you consider a channel with a DNS64 server to be secure. Next slide, please. And this came up in the context of working in the V6 Ops working group with Jen on a draft for CLAT recommendations, basically telling a node when should you turn on CLAT and how, which for those in the room who love DNS and don't know about the IPv6 stuff is really about, we need to discover a prefix from the network and then use it to encapsulate IPv4 traffic inside IPv6. Great. We get one way to get that prefix is from a DNS64 server. But that RFC today says, you should use a secure channel to make those queries, and secure counts as use an IPsec-based VPN or something at the link layer. That's the exact definition. Not great after all the work this group has done and others, right? Like we have do not resuscitate now, which allows the network to tell you what the configuration of the DNS64 server is for DO or DOT or DOC. And then the node could use that directly. And that would be a much more DNS native way of saying this is a secure channel. So next slide, please. This draft updates that definition to say this, the ADD working group's approach is what counts as a secure channel. But the other thing it does that I didn't name accountably for is it removes a DNSSEC fallback that said, well, if it's not a secure channel, then use DNSSEC to validate a resolution from the DNS64 server that it can sign with a name you expect to be associated with the DNS64 server. Well, if we can discover a name associated with the server, i.e. by using a DNR, then we have a much better mechanism right now. And so it just removes that mechanism entirely. So when I posted that to the mailing lists, the discussion immediately turned to, well, why don't we just deprecate DNS64 altogether, which kicked off a lively discussion. So if that question is interesting to you, or you want to see any other change to 7050, also skip your other commitments and come to DNS op in session 5.
Tommy, will you take questions in the middle because Lorenzo
We're
jumped
done.
in the queue? Okay.
Yeah, this is it.
Lorenzo? Oh, I'm sorry. You do the queue.
So I read the just quickly scan the text in 7050. It does say it should communicate with a trusted DNS server, but it doesn't say that a DNS server should be trusted. So I wonder if that's an opening here, because I mean, you're doing 7050 over something like this is kind of silly in general. So maybe we might be able to just leave it alone.
I'm not a lawyer, but the last time I read through it, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a way around me having to say I violate the RFC if I don't do this. I can take another look at it, but I don't think leaving it alone is our best
Well,
bet.
it doesn't say what constitutes trust, right? So
Do you want to write a draft about that?
that's still fine.
That was the cue.
Any other? Thank you. Thank you, Tommy.
Yep.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is Dan Wing. Okay, Dan, I think we got the right slides up for you.
Awesome.
And just let me know when you want to flip, and I will push the button.
Sure. So we updated the former draft that we had on delegated credentials to ADD encrypted DNS forwarders. But I'd like to talk about both DNS forwarders and hosting encrypted servers. So not just DNS servers. Next slide, please. So at IETF 119, Turu gave a presentation which on the delegated credentials, and kind of a reminder of his whole presentation is now on this one slide, which is he described the system that he had deployed at McAfee, which is also similar to the system deployed by Mozilla and also by Cujo, that CPE gets CA signed certificates from a cloud service that's operated by the vendor. And each of the CPE get a unique name. And that's how they were deploying encrypted servers in order to operate things inside of that CPE to do things for the subscriber. The difficulty they ran into is certificate authorities are unhappy to create millions of certificates and update those certificates every 90 days or 30 days or whatever the lifetime is that they had configured. So the purpose of that presentation was at 119 was to start discussion on other things that we can do to reduce that impact and reliance on certificate authorities and start to explore some other technologies. Next slide, please. As part of that, as part of the conclusion of 119 was that the problem seems bigger than ADD. So Where we are is, how to do TLS to DNS and how to get certificates down there to make TLS happy. But there's other places where certificates on those same CPE can be helpful, like HTTPS for the CPE management. And then on other CPE, like a NAS or a laptop that wants to serve its disks to other devices in the network, which again could be a CPE that is also your router. Some of them have disk drives connected to them, and it wants to do SMB over QUIC or SMB over TLS, and also a printer, which of course is not built into your router, or at least I haven't seen one yet. But and other things that we'd like to connect to directly, ideally. Internet of Things, thing that came up at IETF 119 was also a Plex server in the house. Which might be integrated into a set-top box, might be a dedicated workstation that you have at home, where you're connecting directly to it rather than connecting to a cloud to rendezvous between the thermostat and the smartphone, but rather having the smartphone connect directly to the Internet of Things device, and having a real certificate for that is the solution for that today. But ADD seem to kind of tease this problem out because we're trying to do TLS for DNS, but there's TLS that kind of begs to be used for a bunch of these other things. Next slide. So most of the rest of the time that we have, I'd like to just leave this slide up and solicit discussion at the mic, because I don't have the answers. I'm hoping the result of this will be people volunteering to write and help write a problem statement document. We've taken a stab at it. I think it can be improved. I think there's requirements that we're missing, and these are the techniques that have been mentioned. I emailed the working group yesterday with a pointer to Martin Thompson's Google Doc, which is at the bottom, the HTTPS for local domains. He explores both what Mozilla deployed for their IoT gateway, as well as a bunch of other ideas, some of which are similar to what's in the document that we have, that ADD encrypted DNS forwarders. And it's like, do the normal CA signed certificates, but we get pushback from that from CAs. We need a contract with them, throw them some money, somehow get over their rate limit. Clearly that's possible. But also, do we want to do other techniques? The short-lived certificates and name constraints are things that the authors of the document have talked about for a while, but perhaps there are other techniques that would reduce our reliance on CAs. So that's all I have for presentation. My only follow-up slide is soliciting authors. So we'll just leave this slide up and see what folks have to say.
Yeah, you have several people in the queue now, so Tobias.
Awesome.
So Tobias Siewig, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, but speaking.
Tobias, sorry, could you speak up, or we're not hearing you really well over there.
Okay, I tried to get the microphone. So Tobias Siewig, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, but speaking for myself. So what I would say is that technically the ACME/CA way with a domain assigned per CPE would be the most, technically sensible, but I do see the CA problem. And the question is whether TLS-A might be actually something useful there, because if clients would start to actually support that for HTTP, then an ISP could just basically handle TLS-A registration from their end devices for the delegated zone under their whatever zone for CPEs. And that problem kind of could be solved in a very local way.
Okay.
Eric Vink. Hello, Dan.
Hello,
Speaking
Eric.
Here, speaking here as the responsibility, must admit I'm confused. It looks like we are now talking about plain, normal TLS server in ADD, which is part of the charter, right? So we can continue working here, but that's outside of the charter. I'm missing the point.
Well, we need to solve this problem for ADD. So a DNS server sitting at the CPE, what sort of authentication and identity do we want to do to that server?
Sure, but let's at least keep focus just on the DNS server, DNS forwarders, right? And
Sure.
it's completely outside of the scope of the ADD working group.
So Eric, question then from the chairs. So if we focus on only the TLS connection portion for the DNS server on the CPE, is that work in our charter? Is that something we would need to take someplace else in your opinion?
I mean, honestly, for this one, it's more global. I would assume that the work should be done outside with the DNS and the web server, the printers outside, even working group, a new working group or whatever. We can maybe push it into ADD if we focus only on the DNS forwarders, because it's the second item in our charter, discovery of the server could be somehow linked to it, right?
It does, I mean, I'll comment back that it does seem that the use of the CA, the presence of the CA on the CPE to discover the resolver on the CPE if present is a necessary component of the discovery mechanism. So then you could argue that it belongs here.
That's the point where I say, yeah, it's maybe in the charter. But honestly, like we said in 119, the problem is much broader than ADD, and let's fix all the problem together. I mean, outside of ADD, clearly. Now we can continue to talk here, right? So
Is there such a group?
We can create one, or work in other.
Okay.
In ACME, for instance, it's not really in the charter, but we can try to find a good home for this, because
A
that's
good home is better than a bad home. I got you, Eric. Okay.
Yeah, most probably, right? I say ACME because, yeah.
Sure.
And sorry for the bad news, but.
QMySol, MPI Inf, and Acme enthusiast. I think you have correctly identified the problem here that TLS is tied to a CA, and there is work to not tie it to a CA, but in the current state of things, it is tied to a CA. And a publicly trusted CA at that. Acme is probably the best way that we currently have to do this. I don't think we should come up with a DNS specific way. And there is definitely a problem of TLS certificates for devices within a private network or a home network. But I don't think here is the place for that. If we want TLS certificates for devices in a home network, maybe Acme is the best place for that. If there's discussion about putting a CA on the CPE, then maybe the CPE can also run an Acme server for the home network. Not very well formulated idea in my head, but that's a possibility. I think we can split off the TLS bit and shove it over to Acme, and Acme can deal with how do we automate these certificate issuances for the devices in a home network.
Thanks.
Ben Schwartz. So first to Tobias mentioning TLSA. That is essentially the premise of the Danish working group, which attempted to lay out an architecture for that. You can follow that work if you're interested in what they came up with. I agree with everybody saying this is the wrong place for this discussion. I do think that Acme may not be the best place either. In my view, we need to go much deeper and think about what the entire user flow looks like. In my view, I think probably the entire concept of an HTTPS scheme, or for example, in the context of home networking, is just not right. And so we need to go start, from the W3C, figure out what it would mean to have a proper URI that identifies a device on a home network and how that propagates across the whole stack.
Eric Nygren. I agree this is a problem that definitely needs solving. I also kind of agree with what people were saying that this is way outside the scope of here, but I think this is something that is certainly worth doing in probably a new working group. I think to what Ben said, I think we're stepping back here because it's unclear that in a home network, kind of the CA model we've had makes sense. I think Martin Thompson's HTTPS for local domains model, which is similar to what SFS did many years ago, where you have the the host name cryptographically tied to the certificate. So you kind of have your identity and your name coupled together cryptographically is a path worth exploring, but that's the sort of thing that want to be done in the context of a working group that looked at what are the requirements.
Thanks, Aaron.
So Tobias Siebig, MPI-Inf again. One thing that I just realized, if we scope this to DNS, I think it also carries a question of how relevant it actually is. Because if we look at Jeff Houston's measurements, it's basically quad 8, quad 1, quad 9. So the question is, for an ISP, do they really need the DNS resolver on the CPE, or could they just push like their DNS resolvers? And if I look at my home ISP, which is like one of the instances of LGI in Europe, they're actually pushing like global unicast IPv4 DNS resolvers, which are somewhat more central. So is it really still a UX feature that the DNS recursor is on the CPE?
One comment on that is, when we've talked about this in previous ADDs over the last couple of years, one of the things that has become clear is that there's many variants of how people have deployed this at the ISP level. And if you can think of a crazy way to do it, somebody probably has. So the answer is, there probably are people that have come forth in the past and said, I do need this for my crazy deployment.
Tommy Jensen. Thank you for bringing this back as a topic. I know that its home doesn't need to be here, but we all clearly care a great deal for obvious reasons. One of the probably stupid questions that I have that illustrate why it may not belong here is, I didn't see any mention in the comparison of options delegated credentials. And if you assume that we're at a point where you want a certificate for a given name on the box, and that the scenario really only works when the box is able to connect upstream anyway, why not use that instead of star potentially, even if it's just a list why it's not under consideration? Other than that, though, just to the larger discussion, I don't know exactly where it should be. If it would be a BOF, though, I will absolutely attend, help, review, etc.
Thanks. The previous document we had was draft RBW ADD delegated credentials, and this one superseded that. And part of it was because of some feedback we got that delegated credentials wasn't the best thing to do. We can certainly revisit that. I think a good, strong requirements spec may help tease out the pluses and minuses of that choice.
Hi, Sid Alam Cujo. Just wanted to show my.
Sorry,
can you hear me?
No.
Sid Alam Cujo. Just wanted to show my support for this as well. Something we are all interested in. Thank you for bringing it up here.
Thanks.
Any other comments on this topic? Going once, going twice. I think we're done. All right. Well, we have met. We have successfully got through our entire agenda. And so, unless somebody else has some pressing business that they want to bring forward in the AOB section,
Get a whole lot of time back.
I believe it's 3:30 in the afternoon. It probably is too early to go to the bar. But you have the option, so we are done here.
Let the notes reflect a cry of disbelief from the assembled crowd. Yeah. Okay.
We're done here. Thank you very much. We'll see you in Dublin.
Thank you, everybody.
Very efficiently.
And now all the people that have lied and actually do intend to debate this intensely can come up to the front of the room.
Yeah.
That's a
Where-
bar
but,
buff.
but where are you going to find a bar in Dublin?
See, that's a bar buff. We do not have any definition of a bar working group.